While the majority of European Union countries distanced themselves from Russia following its invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Hungary took a very different approach. Instead of joining in on the push to impose heavy sanctions on Moscow, Hungary continued to maintain its close ties with Russia, particularly in the energy sector. They're still buying billions of dollars in Russian oil and gas every year. And instead of scaling back on ties with China, Hungary seems to be rolling out the red carpet. This has earned Hungary the nickname of Russia and China's Trojan horse within the EU. Why? Because they've been actively blocking or delaying EU actions meant to help Ukraine or sanction Russia. Hungary is standing on the EU stage but playing for another team. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has gone so far as to accuse the EU of wanting to tear down his government. This is a bold claim, and it shows how tense the relationship between Hungary and the EU has become. Instead of aligning with Western policies, Orbán has turned to BRICS countries, saying that working with them is necessary for Hungary's economic growth and security. Is Hungary trying to pave the way for a new global alliance? Possibly. By aligning with Russia and China, they're signaling a shift in loyalty away from the EU's traditional Western allies. But it doesn't come without its risks. For example, if Hungary's alignment with Russia and China causes friction with the EU, it could lose access to critical funding and markets. Standing apart from the EU might leave them isolated if their relationships with Russia or China sour. So, is Hungary a visionary, carving out a unique path for its future? Or are they playing a dangerous game that could backfire? Let's see if we can answer these questions. Hungary's relationship with the European Union has taken quite a turn. Back in 2004, its accession to the EU was celebrated as a major step forward, not just for Hungary, but for the EU's broader vision of unity and expansion. Hungary was one of 10 countries to join that year, reaping the rewards of massive EU investments aimed at improving infrastructure, governance, and economic stability. From cohesion funds to the Juncker Plan, the EU poured resources into helping these new members catch up economically, leading to remarkable gains in growth, productivity, and income levels. So, how did things shift from celebration to confrontation? Fast forward to recent years, and Orbán has taken a more combative stance toward the EU. He's not advocating for an exit like Brexit, but rather for reshaping the EU from within. His message is clear. If Hungary wants to maintain its sovereignty, it must wield influence in Brussels. Orbán's government has been actively building its presence in EU politics, using resources to steer debates on critical issues like migration, climate change, and support for Ukraine. A defining moment came in October 2023, when Hungary and Slovakia blocked a €50 billion aid package for Ukraine. Despite 25 other member states backing it, this bold move reflected Hungary's increasingly defiant stance, further fueled by declining support for the EU among Hungarians. Only 39% of Hungarians now view the EU positively, below the EU average. This drop is especially pronounced among young people, who have been hit hard by policies that exclude Hungarian universities from key EU programs like Erasmus. Confidence in the EU has also dipped, falling from 56% to 50% in just a few months. With economic challenges, rising skepticism among younger generations, and Orbán's confrontational approach, Hungary's once celebrated EU membership now feels like a tug of war. But what's driving these deep shifts in sentiment? Let's look at the factors reshaping Hungary's place in the European project. Viktor Orbán has a long history of butting heads with the EU. Recently, he's taken an even more rebellious stance, calling for resistance against EU laws and court rulings that he claims interfere with Hungary's national sovereignty. Why? Well, for starters, the EU fined Hungary $200 million, which is about $213 million, and imposed daily penalties of $1 million for not following EU asylum rules. Orbán isn't happy, and he is actively demanding that Hungary's voice be considered in major EU decisions and calling for the unfreezing of European funds allocated to the country. Despite his criticism of the EU and efforts to build alternative ties with Russia and China, Hungary's economy remains heavily reliant on European funding and investments. One of the big issues driving the tension is energy. Hungary is heavily dependent on Russia for both gas and oil, with about 85% of its gas and 65% of its oil coming from Russia. Why? It all goes back to the communist era when Hungary built its infrastructure around Russian energy supplies. The Friendship Pipeline, completed in the 1960s, still delivers most of Hungary's gas today. After the fall of communism, Hungary increased gas consumption, especially in households. But with domestic gas production dropping by 35% over the years, the country now relies on long-term contracts with Gazprom, Russia's gas giant. In fact, Hungary signed a 15-year deal with Gazprom in 2021 for 4.5 billion cubic meters of gas annually. The catch was to bypass Ukraine, avoiding the messy disputes between Kyiv and Moscow. The contract details are all classified by the Hungarian government. It's not just gas and oil. Hungary's electricity supply is also tied to Russia. Half of the country's electricity comes from the Pax nuclear power plant, built using Russian technology. In 2014, Orbán struck a deal with Moscow to build 2 new nuclear blocks without consulting parliament. This agreement further deepened Hungary's reliance on Russian nuclear technology and fuel. Orbán's close ties with Russia complicate Hungary's position in the EU. While other EU countries are working to reduce their reliance on Russian energy, Hungary argues that its geography and infrastructure make this nearly impossible. According to him, this reliance is a physical situation, but critics say it gives Moscow a lot of leverage over Hungary. But how long can Hungary juggle these conflicting loyalties? That's the big question. One of those conflicting loyalties is Hungary's ties with China. Their relationship stands out in Central and Eastern Europe, CEE. Historically, Hungary was one of the first countries to recognize China and, since the early 2000s, has worked to deepen this relationship. Politically, Hungary has even crafted an Eastern opening policy, making it the only CEE nation with a formal strategy toward Asia. Economically, Hungary has become the top destination for Chinese foreign direct investment in the region. It's also home to the largest Chinese population in CEE, further solidifying its role as a hub for Chinese interests. China's global infrastructure plan, the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, has been a cornerstone of its cooperation with Hungary. This initiative looks for ways to connect Asia and Europe through massive infrastructure projects. For Hungary, participating in the BRI means building stronger trade routes, such as the Belgrade-Budapest Railway. This $3 billion project, co-financed by Chinese loans, will cut travel time between the two cities to just 2.5 hours and create a faster pathway for Chinese goods to reach Western Europe. Hungary is also exploring other infrastructure projects, such as turning Szombathely and Debrecen airports into major European cargo hubs. Now, why does this matter? Hungary's position is geographically strategic. Located in the heart of Europe, it serves as a transit point for Chinese goods moving from the Greek port of Piraeus to the rest of Europe. This makes Hungary a major player in China's grand strategy for connectivity between Europe and Asia. While cooperation with China has opened doors, it comes with limitations and criticisms. For projects like the Belgrade-Budapest Railway, largely funded by Chinese loans, it raises concerns about debt dependency on China and financial sovereignty. In addition, Hungary's close ties with China often put it at odds with the EU. For example, Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's refusal to join the EU's boycott of the 2023 Belt and Road Forum, where Vladimir Putin was present, drew criticism. Hungary's position as a China advocate has weakened its influence within both the EU and NATO. While Hungary is positioning itself as a key ally of China, the economic reality is that China cannot replace the EU's single market or its funding opportunities. The EU remains Hungary's largest trading partner, and any disruption to that relationship could have serious economic consequences. Hungary's foreign policy pivot is causing ripple effects far beyond its borders, raising questions about the stability of EU unity and NATO solidarity. Hungary's refusal to approve $6.5 billion in military assistance to Ukraine through the European Peace Facility, EPF, has become an issue in EU operations. The deadlock began with a $500 million tranche and has since escalated, blocking an additional $1.5 billion and halting progress on a $5 billion fund intended for further aid. For over a year now, Hungary has said no to releasing this money. This isn't just a one-time thing. Their veto is blocking 3 different aid packages and preventing future funds from moving forward. This matters because Ukraine is fighting for its survival. Meanwhile, the EU is stuck, unable to act as one united group. Frustrated EU leaders are now finding other ways to send support to Ukraine, but the delays are making the EU look unorganized. If that wasn't enough, Hungary also took its time approving Sweden's membership in NATO. Now, NATO is a military alliance, and with Russia's increasing aggression, Sweden wanted to join for protection. This looks very simple, but not with Hungary in the mix. Hungary delayed the process for almost 2 years. It all boils down to politics. Sweden criticized Hungary's democracy, and Hungary didn't like it. Their response was to drag their feet. Even after Turkey gave Sweden the green light, Hungary kept saying, "Let's negotiate more." This made NATO look less united at a time when the alliance really needed to stand together. Hungary's veto on military aid has disrupted the EU's ability to present a united front on Ukraine. It also exposes the limitations of the EU's consensus-based decision-making, where one member state can block critical initiatives. NATO is supposed to be about quick, strong responses, but Hungary makes it look divided. In addition, Hungary's actions are making other EU countries cautious about expanding the Union. For example, countries in the Western Balkans, like Serbia or Montenegro, want to join the EU, but if they're seen as following Hungary's lead, defying EU rules, or ignoring democratic principles, they might face delays. Currently, Hungary's actions are sending mixed signals. While it seeks closer ties with Eastern powers like Russia and China, it remains economically dependent on the EU and NATO. This balancing act risks isolating Hungary within both alliances, especially as other member states grow increasingly frustrated with its obstructionist tactics. Against this backdrop, BRICS positions itself as an initiative offering a different approach, one focused on cooperation, shared prosperity, and the pursuit of a more balanced world order, at least according to official statements. This is often contrasted with the traditional competitive logic, where one country's gains are seen as another's losses. But then there's Hungary, seemingly playing a complex game. While it's a member of the EU and benefits from the economic and political advantages that come with it, Hungary's actions don't always seem to align with the Union's goals. In fact, Hungary's behavior has earned it the reputation of a bit of a troublemaker in the EU, often seen as undermining the unity of the group. Interestingly, Hungary does play a role as a bridge between the EU and the Western Balkans, especially when it comes to countries like Bosnia and Herzegovina. Zelica Cvijanović, the chairwoman of Bosnia and Herzegovina's presidency, pointed out that Hungary could help these countries strengthen ties with the European community. This paints Hungary as a possible leader in expanding EU influence in the Balkans, which is a strategic move for both Hungary and the EU in maintaining regional stability and economic growth. However, the perception of Hungary within the EU isn't all positive. According to the EU Cohesion Monitor, Hungary stands out in a not-so-good way as an outlier. Among the Visegrad countries of the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, and Hungary, Hungary is often seen as acting differently or going against the collective EU interest. This raises questions about Hungary's commitment to the broader European project. Hungary's path isn't clear-cut. It could be positioning itself as a key player in the evolving multipolar world order, where countries are looking to build relationships outside traditional power structures. But at the same time, if it continues to clash with the EU and NATO, it might find itself more isolated in the future. The question is whether Hungary will remain a troublemaker or transform into a strategic player capable of actively shaping the future of Europe and the emerging global order. What do you think about Hungary's prospects? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like this video and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest developments. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.